Hello and welcome to this overview of the Enhanced Evidence Broker for 702. This presentation will focus on the administrator functionality and technical details of the implementation. For the agenda, we'll be taking a look at the technical solution, the to-be scenario, technical details, and finally where to find more information. To understand the benefits of the evidence broker, we're firstly going to have a look at the administrator persona. Typically, an administrator or developer is responsible for configuring evidence sharing and troubleshooting evidence sharing issues. Robert, our administrator, often gets queries from caseworkers about duplicate evidence and other sharing issues. Unfortunately, Robert doesn't have any visibility into how evidence flows through the system, and this makes it difficult to answer queries from caseworkers or from the field. In addition, he finds it difficult to manage evidence configuration because there are hundreds of configurations listed at a very granular level on the interface, and he finds that he has to paginate through a number of items to get to where he needs to go. Now we will take a look at the technical solution and the key features that help people like Robert in their job today. This table summarizes those key technical features of the new evidence broker. Firstly, the new broker provides advanced data matching algorithms which ensure that duplicate evidence is not added. Duplicate evidence is caused by retaining incoming and existing evidence as two separate evidence records rather than matching and acknowledging that these are the same evidence record. Sharing evidence brings more than the change record, but a wide set of shared data for better matching and more context for manual intervention. Secondly, a wide set of shared data is used for better matching and to provide context for caseworkers when manual intervention is required. To the third point, the new broker calculates the delivery plan in advance. This deterministic behavior provides consistent results each time sharing is performed for a particular scenario. Workflows are now included in evidence sharing to drive a structured sharing process. There are two new workflows, one called Advanced Evidence Sharing Workflow and Advanced Evidence Sharing Workflow Pool. Sharing configurations are defined within source and target case types. Therefore, rather than searching through hundreds of configurations, administrators first locate the source and target and then select the configuration for the specific evidence type. Logically equivalent configurations specify mapping rules in XML, which allow administrators to specify mapping actions. And finally, the new broker provides a tool for tracing the flow of evidence through the system. In addition, developers can turn on tracing to log detailed information about evidence sharing. Now let's look at some of these features in more detail. This is the sharing configurations list page. You will see here that at the top level, the administrator needs to expand the source and target to see the evidence types that are mapped. Both identical and logically equivalent evidence type configurations are grouped within these source and target types, and this makes it much easier to manage the configurations. This is the new sharing configuration wizard used to set up a brand new evidence sharing configuration. The administrator uses the new sharing configuration wizard to configure identical and logically equivalent evidence sharing in the same process. The new sharing configuration wizard also allows the administrator to load the XML mapping file, which defines the mappings and rules for sharing logically equivalent evidence. The administrator is guided through all the configuration steps as they progress through the pages. This next screen is the Shared Instance Search page. The Shared Instance Search was introduced to provide details about the evidence broker's decision for each evidence record that it shares. Administrators can search on either a person reference or case reference to get a list of sharing instances where the person or case was a source or target. Administrators can expand the rows in the search result to view a graphical representation of how the corresponding evidence record is shared between cases. By hovering the mouse over the icons, administrators can view information about the type of evidence that is being shared and the system action that was completed by the broker. For example, ignore, in brackets linked, means that the evidence broker has determined that the evidence record on the source case is already on the target case. Now we will look at some of the technical concepts. Shared data. Shared data is a set of contextual data that helps the broker more accurately match evidence records and helps the caseworker during manual intervention. It consists of the following items: an active evidence record of a particular type with all its attributes and values, the changes that are made to an active evidence record over time. If the change is for a new effective date, it is a succession, otherwise it is a correction. Historical evidence which provides all successions that track how this evidence has changed over time. Any related evidence records that are linked by a parent-child relationship in a hierarchy, including multiple instances of records at any level in the hierarchy. The members and participants that are listed on the evidence records that are contained within the evidence dataset. Data matching. The broker applies data matching to determine whether the evidence record matches any records that are already on the case. That is, do the target and source have the same evidence before we can apply the evidence changes? By applying data matching algorithms to a wide set of contextual data, the broker can more accurately match each shared evidence record between the source and target cases. Depending on whether an exact match is identified, the broker can determine that the evidence record should be inserted onto, modified on, or removed from the target case. Depending on the situation, the recommended action could be not to share the evidence or present the evidence to the caseworker for manual intervention. Now let's take a look at how the evidence broker operates. Evidence sharing can be quite complex. The broker must handle several scenarios, taking into account the configuration options and the set of shared data. This diagram summarizes the main steps that the broker performs when sharing evidence from a source case to a target case. Looking at number 1, evidence sharing is triggered by caseworkers when they perform one of the following tasks: when they add a person as a case member, when they activate the addition, modification, or removal of evidence onto a case, or when they authorize an application case. In the second step, the evidence broker applies data matching to determine whether the active evidence record matches any records that are already on the case. Data matching considers the sharing configuration, evidence sharing rules, and evidence maintenance rules. In step 3, the broker recommends one of the following actions: insertion. This is where the target does not have the shared evidence record already held on the target case. Modification. This is where the target has evidence prior to its modification. Removal. This is where the target has the evidence record. Ignore, and this is where the evidence is not to be shared. Or manual intervention, and this is where the attributes do not match or the source is not trusted. In step 4, if the evidence can be automatically applied, it is delivered to the target case and it's activated. In step 5, if the evidence record requires manual intervention by a caseworker, the broker places an incoming evidence record into the caseworker's incoming list on the target case, and this is for manual review and processing. A notification is sent to the caseworker. For example, this might say, new incoming evidence on case 512 needs to be resolved. In this case, manual intervention is required in the following circumstances: where the evidence type is not specified as a trusted source in the sharing configuration, where the parent and child evidence types have a conflicting sharing configuration, and where the broker cannot identify an exact match between the incoming evidence record and the existing evidence record held on the target case. And finally, in step 6, information about the evidence sharing is recorded. Administrators can see how evidence was brokered around the system by using the shared instance search page you saw earlier. The Knowledge Center contains a number of detailed descriptions of how the broker shares evidence for different scenarios. Evidence sharing is configured between source and targets for each evidence type. The types of sources and targets can be person or prospect person in some situations, application case and integrated case or product delivery case. To configure bidirectional evidence sharing between two case types, you must create a separate sharing configuration for each direction. If you select Yes to indicate that the source is trusted, this means that evidence from the specified source is shared to the target case and activated without the need for a caseworker to intervene. Trusted source is typically set to Yes when an organization manages different case types but within the same lines of business. You can configure the broker to always share associated verification items or only if they are used or required by the target case as defined in any verification rules configurations. If the broker shares verification items to a target case and the verification requirements are the same between the source case and the target case, it is not necessary for the caseworker to re-verify evidence that is already verified for that client. If the source and target evidence types are not identical, you must configure logically equivalent sharing. To configure the new evidence broker, select the Evidence Sharing link from the Administrator's Shortcuts panel. The old evidence broker is still available by selecting Evidence Broker from the panel. The new broker is enabled by default. That is, where this property is set to Yes. To use the old broker until you're ready to start using the new broker, you must set this property to No. Configuring identical evidence types. For each source and target, you must specify the identical and logically equivalent evidence types. For each evidence type, specify whether the source is trusted and the verifications are shared. Configuring logically equivalent evidence types. The previous version of the evidence broker allowed you to map non-identical evidence. However, you could only link the attributes from the evidence types that had to be mapped. More complex mapping required custom code. The new broker introduces the concept of logically equivalent evidence, which provides broader support to share real-world data about clients. In addition to different attribute names and code table values, the new broker allows you to map different data structures. In addition, the mapping is fully integrated into all aspects of evidence sharing, and therefore it will have data matching, seamless sharing, insight into shared evidence, and so on, in the same way as identical evidence sharing does. The mapping schema is flexible, so in addition to mapping attributes, the schema also allows you to specify sharing rules, populate default attributes, create child evidence records, and specify that the evidence sharing should appear on the caseworker's incoming list for manual review. The Knowledge Center will provide details about the schema, and it also provides examples of mappings that are provided out of the box. A Developer Works article contains a logically equivalent starter pack containing XML that is used to map logically equivalent data between the income support solution and the income support for medical assistance solutions. This is a useful reference when customizing and creating your own logically equivalent configurations. Troubleshooting evidence sharing errors. If the target case cannot create in-edit evidence for the target case, or if the evidence cannot be activated, all the evidence records within the associated set of data are added to the caseworker's incoming evidence list. If the system cannot activate any evidence record on delivery of a set of evidence to a target case, the evidence remains in an in-edit state and a task is raised for the relevant caseworker. Evidence validation and verification failures can prevent seamless sharing. As mentioned previously, administrators can use the shared instance search by entering the case ID or person ID to get a list of evidence sharing instances for the case and associated person. The administrator can select an icon on the diagram to see the evidence that was shared with the target and the action that the broker performed. The linked status indicates that the broker will remember that the two records are the same in the future and will synchronize any corrections that are made to either record. If sufficient troubleshooting information is not available from the shared instance search, you can enable the evidence sharing trace. The evidence sharing trace records trace each step of the evidence broker's sharing process in a detailed log. Customization and upgrade. A hook point is provided for data matching, which is described in the API for the Advanced Evidence Sharing component. The tables that store the instance data must be purged regularly to prevent the instance data from growing too large. A technical note will describe the tables to purge and how often you should purge them. 3 columns were added to the Evidence Broker admin table to cater for the new evidence sharing configurations. These changes do not impact old sharing configurations. Customers will need to review their custom sharing configurations and recreate these in the new evidence sharing configuration. This includes customizing and creating the mapping XML. Customers should consult the logically equivalent starter pack in the Developer Works article. Finally, the Knowledge Centre contains detailed documentation about the new Evidence Broker. This includes information about how supported scenarios operate, how to configure the Evidence Broker, and troubleshooting. And as previously mentioned, the Developer Works article contains the logically equivalent configuration starter pack. This is the IBM legal disclaimer. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this technical overview of the Evidence Broker.